do. Oh, you turn my head around. Yeah, you turn me upside down. I'm losing my mind, and you let me know. You say I'm losing my mind, but you stole mine. Now I'm out of control.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Area 312 Rock and Metal Vodcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kent, along with my co-host,
Rex.
friends. Regarding our very special guest today, they helped form one of the most revered bands in the pantheon of Christian metal. Their 1986 debut album is considered an all-time classic in the Christian metal pantheon. And did you know, friends, that the drummer for this band and the guitarist were in a Seattle-based pop rock band together prior to captivating the ears of Christian headbangers worldwide? Friends, that can only mean two people. I'm talking about the drummer for Bloodgood and Crystal City Rockers, JT Taylor, and the lead guitarist for Bloodgood and Crystal City Rockers, Mr. David Zaffiro. Welcome, gentlemen. It's a very distinct honor to have you on.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Likewise.
Well, gentlemen, we always like to start out at square one, and we'd like to know, did you have music in the home growing up, whether coming from the radio or perhaps you had some family members who performed music?
JT, you want to go first?
Oh, okay. So my immediate family was pretty musical. My mother was she sang, she was a singer. She was a big band jazz singer up in New York, and she would sing with several big orchestras, like Glenn Miller type orchestras, and she sang Ella Fitzgerald kind of style back in the day. And she was a big influence on me musically. And my sister, she's about 5 years older than me. She grew up, being a soloist, soprano soloist in school. And then she became a professional opera singer in her 20s and early 30s in Rochester, New York. And my brother Daniel was a guitar player in a band in Buffalo, New York. That they ended up getting booked on the Ed Sullivan Show, which is pretty cool. And it was kind of a blood, sweat, and tears kind of a band. They had a brass section and horns, and he was a guitar player, and so he enjoyed that. But I was influenced by all that, and but really, my biggest influence was when I was 8 years old. Was the Beatles, obviously. So my cousin had a small little record player, and I got a hold of one of his 45s. I Want to Hold Your Hand. And I think I played it about 25 times, in a row, and just struck me like in such a way. And then I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and saw Ringo back there, bebopping, shaking his head and smiling. And I thought, I think I'd like to do that. That looks like fun. So that's, pretty much my early roots, if you will, or my influences musically.
Very cool, very cool. Beatles fan here too, by the way, JT. David, how about you, sir?
I'm pretty much the only musician in the family. We have artists in the family, but not musicians, except for me. I was influenced by. I'm the youngest of nine, so my brothers and sisters were always throwing music my direction. So I'd go up in, my sister's room, which is a huge room, had like a walkway and then had like a bathroom with a sunken bathtub and the lights around the mirror and all this stuff. And it had all these bunk beds that were custom made by my dad. And I just go listen. They had a record player in there, and I just go and listen to records and enjoy that. But no musicians in the family besides myself.
Gotcha. Well, gentlemen, regarding and I know that you all, David, I know that you play multi-instruments, and JT, I know I see your guitar and your bass back there. And JT, I know you primarily and probably most of us fans do, as a percussionist, a drummer. David, we know you primarily as a lead guitarist and a lead singer. Regarding your primary instruments that we know you for, were you self-taught or did you take lessons?
I was self-taught. I mean, I got influenced by and taught by other fellow friends and musicians. Like Bill Hale, I was in a band called Blind Alice up in Anchorage, and I was like, I think I was like either 16 or 17, and he was 14. He was kind of like a little child prodigy, extremely good player. And I learned a lot from him. Um, and then, of course, over the years, you learn. You're going to have at some point, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to learn music theory. You're going to have to learn a number of things to translate that, especially if you're a record producer. Pretty important. But as far as official lessons, not really. Von Beck taught me some stuff. They're friends. They're great players. But no, self-taught.
JT, how about you, sir?
I took lessons. My first lessons I ever took was from my brother that was in the band in Buffalo, and his drummer. So I think I was 12 at the time, or 11 or 12. And so I took my beginning lessons. I had a little paper out, and I took my first money and I bought my little pad, my sticks, and I ride my bike over to this guy's house, and he was living in his parents' basement, as all musicians when they're 17 or 18, right? So anyway, he would give me his, my little half-hour lesson, and I'd go home, and I had to hide the fact that I was actually playing the drums because my father, was type AAA personality. He did not want to hear the drums or anything that had to do with the drums. I was playing the trumpet too at the time, at the same time. Back then, I don't play that, and I haven't played it for many years. And but anyway, so I guess from the kit wise standpoint, just watching a lot of really good drummers. Of course, we didn't have YouTube when I first started playing the drum set. But my mom, being in big band, she set my drums up in front of the hi-fi, and she put on Glenn Miller, and she said, if you're going to learn how to play, you're going to learn how to play to this first. So I actually learned how to play jazz, big band jazz, before I was actually playing rock, but really, I guess like David, I think I'm, self-taught, just a lot of practice and, just grinding it out,
Yes, sir. Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa, a lot of great jazz drummers in there. And gentlemen, let's talk about this release. Crystal City Rockers, after all these years, and after all these years of my first introduction to Bloodgood in '86, I find out in 2021 that, lo and behold, David Zaffiro and JT Taylor are in a band called Crystal City Rockers. Gentlemen, if I may ask, when did the band originate, and how did the Crystal City Rockers form?
Was it 81, JT?
Yeah, I think early 81, David. Yeah. I want you go ahead. I want to hear your version.
JT pretty much started the band. I mean, he was looking for players, and there's a friend of ours, JT, my friend Brian Longwell, was kind of dabbling in things and working with JT and stuff like that. And Brian's incredibly talented, but as far as completing something, getting it from A to B, good luck. It's not going to happen, And then, so JT and I jammed, and I forgot how did I don't remember exactly how I met you, though. How did I find out about the band?
We were both going to Calvary Chapel, or, Grace Chapel, or Calvary Fellowship.
Calvary Fellowship
in Seattle. And I had tried to start a band with Greg Reed, who was a bass player.
Yeah, Greg Reed, yeah.
And I think Greg Reed, you knew Greg, and you and Susan had just started going to Calvary Fellowship.
Okay.
And then when we're looking for a guitar player, Greg Reed said, "Hey, I know this guy, David. I just met him at Calvary Fellowship, and he's a guitar player. Maybe we could have him come over and jam with us, you know?" So
Yeah.
that's when, and we used to have a gym, you know, the practices were in my basement in Kirkland, Washington. And then David came over to jam, and my memory was that, you know, we played a few songs together, and you know, I was really excited. I mean, I thought, wow, this, you know, this guy can really play, you know. And I mean, I was really psyched. And so then, and the only thing I remember was David, I wasn't sure what he was thinking while we were playing. And then he just all of a sudden quickly started to put his guitar away. And I was getting ready like he was going to leave. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey," I go, "you know, what do you think?" And he looked back at me, he says, he goes, "Yeah, I'll play with you," like that. and
Yeah.
and that was the beginning of it, really, you know. And we just
Yeah. I remember talking to JT. I was like, when I first met him, I think it was at your house. So, because if I met you at Calvary, some reason I feel like I met you at your house first somehow, but I don't know, whatever. And he goes, "Yeah, I'm JT." I go, "JT, what does that stand for?" She goes, "Well, it stands for James Taylor." I said, "Oh, well, so can I call you James?" And he goes, "No." No. I'm like, "Okay, well, I tried, you know." And we it didn't work really well with Greg. He just had other things he wanted to do. He was in the band, not officially per se, but because it hadn't developed that far. And he had this business running sound, live PA, right? And I'm thinking, hey, this is great. We got a PA. He was like, no, no, I'm not using my PA. That's my business. I'm like, oh, what a shame, you know? But Greg left, and then eventually Craig Finley got in there. And of course, Rob Cochran was there. Um, and I think it all came together when Craig and me and Rob and JT all, you know, yeah. And, and uh, but JT started it. It was his vision at the beginning, you know. I was happy. I was along for the ride and loved doing it, you know.
Right.
How can I be so close to you and feel so far away? Why is it that the things I do won't give you time of day? It's alright, it's okay. I heard
Where did the band name Crystal City Rockers come from?
well, so I was reading Revelation, and it talked about the city clear as glass, the crystal city, clear as glass, you know, and so forth. And I thought, wow, that'd make a great name for a band. And I wrote it down on this manila envelope, like probably a good year before I met David. And I think it just kind of like, you know, once we started to jam together and everything, and through a series, we were trying to work on secular rock. We didn't know if we were going to play in clubs or whatever. We didn't really have the direction of the band until David and I wrote a song called "Running Blind," and then once we heard that song, it was like it just clicked. It was like this is the sound, you know. It all of a sudden it was like I don't know, just like the stars aligned or whatever. And it was like the sound just was there, you know. So then we just started writing all originals, and everybody in the band wrote. But the name, I think I just said to the guys, you know, I just came up with this name, the Crystal City Rockers. And what do you think? You know, and I think everybody just went, cool, sounds good to me, you know. So I
Yeah.
think that's how it happened, you know.
And everybody in the band sang. So JT, I mean, which is, you know, that's not very common. I mean, of course, the Beatles did, and then Ringo would sing from time to time. But usually a band, you got the Cars or something like that, and it's not like they're all going to be singing. But JT would sing some songs. He'd sing the songs that he wrote. I would sing the songs I wrote. Craig Finley, same, and Rob Cochran as well. So it was a good chemistry in that regard.
Sure, sure. Now, gentlemen, regarding Crystal City Rockers, JT, you mentioned, your sound and everything. To my ears, personally, I can detect some Beatle-esque, just gonna call it power pop. And interestingly enough, the cover, I'm reminded of kind of like Yellow Submarine or Magical Mystery Tour type, type stuff from the Beatles, myself being a Beatles fan. How would you gentlemen describe your sound to after all these years? How would you all describe your sound?
Well, I'm going to let David answer that because he's really the mastermind behind the production and everything. And David, I come up with a skeleton, and just a real basic melody possibly for my stuff, and then David and I write. He finishes it like like a mastermind. So I'm going to let David answer that.
Okay. Well, I mean, we automatically with Crystal City, we kind of gravitate towards that classic Beatles sound, and I wouldn't say the Stones, but there's just that element of the 60s, or remember the song goes, listen while I play, 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 my green tambourine, those kind of songs that we all grew up with. So when we started crafting this thing, JT would come up with a melody and a lyric, and we just woodshedded for, gosh, we worked a long time on it, really. And I remember It's Only You. There's this one, JT sang that, but he had a hard time with this one part where it goes from a major to the minor. And JT's like, well, why not? And we're on the porch, at my house, and we're working on this. He goes, why do I have to sing it that way? Can't I just sing it the way I want? I'm sure you can sing it however you want, but if you can't sing it the way it's written, then you don't have the liberty to sing it how you want. Sing it this way first, then you can go ahead and move forward. And then by the time he got it, which didn't take too long, but he got it. He's like, no, I'm going to sing it this way. This is good. Yeah. And so it was really fun writing with JT, and Rob, gosh, talk about the mad scientist. Rob would just keep throwing stuff at it and throwing stuff at it. And I'm trying to make it work in the mix. And I'm like, Rob, you can't track the vocals on your phone. You got to use a real microphone, stuff like that. And Craig is bless his heart, man. Southern thing, bless his heart. It was like getting him to get from A to B on anything. He was busy, so he'd be like, "Yeah, I think I can get to that." A week goes by. Craig, did you get to that? No, man. I'll get there. Remember, JT just couldn't get him to get anything done, and finally he did, of course. But so it just rolled into this sound of the original Crystal City, but this one obviously is much more refined. It's recorded better. It's mixed, that sort of thing, which we didn't. I mean, when we did the first Crystal City stuff, we were on a 4-track TAC machine in Robert Case's basement, and you're mixing down 4. He would JT would do his execution and on the drums, and I think somebody else would play, like Craig on bass, maybe, and then they'd bounce it all down to one track. The Rob would play a guitar track, Craig would play bass, JT did his drums, boom, all goes down to one track. Now we have 3 more tracks to build on the vocals, and then you mix it. And it just, JT was always like, over the years, he would be like, I hate that sound. I said, well, yeah. He goes, yeah, I sound like I'm playing Quaker Oats boxes. He goes, it's the worst drum sound in the world, But we didn't have a choice, it's, you get what you get for free. So
Sure. So, David, you answered one of my forthcoming questions. I mean, you all do have recordings. Would that be back in 81 that those recordings were made, 81, 82-ish?
Yeah, I think so. We did 2. Crystal City did 2 different recordings, one with JT and then one after JT left the band. We did another one called Jump. And that was a little bit better. I was on a nicer machine. It might have been a JH16 or a JH24 track. I think it might have been a 16. And so, more tracks sounded better and that sort of thing. But we did 2 projects. Uh-huh.
Had those early recordings, just out of curiosity, because by the way, JT, you are executive producer on here as listed, and David was listed as producer. Very well done, very well engineered and mixed and produced. My hat's off to you guys. It's the sound, no pun intended, is clear as crystal on this thing. It's wonderful,
Yeah.
very crisp. Have you guys thought, or might there be a chance of those original recordings surfacing on an album? I think that would be neat.
Well, Rob had the masters for a while, right, JT? He actually had the
Yeah.
I think it was a quarter-inch tape, quarter-inch Ampex master. And at this point, if we ever got those, we'd have to bake it. Have you guys ever heard of that? Baking
Yep.
Yes,
it?
sir.
Yep.
To
Yep.
preserve it from falling apart.
Yeah, so you bake it and you got maybe 2 passes as it's going down to a digital format, and we'd have to do that, but it never got from A to B, and I think they just got lost or something. So getting those original recordings, I mean, we may have a cassette hanging out somewhere, but no, they're all gone.
Well, it would be,
Bye bye.
as fans here, 2 fans here, may I humbly submit, I think it would be very neat if those could see the light of day. I love preserving that history, of bands such as you all. And
The interesting thing, I just let me interject this real quick. I don't know if you guys have heard of this Moises. Have you heard of this application called Moises?
I've heard of it, but I'm not
So
knowledgeable.
you could take the Crystal City Rockers cassette, if JT had one or something like that, the original, and you could dump it into Moises, stereo track, and it's going to separate out the drums, the bass, and the vocals. It'll separate it all out, and then you could literally kind of remix it again. Pretty
That is
amazing.
cool.
It's AI technology.
Uh-huh.
If
That's
only you all knew of
That's
a
how they did
studio
the new.
engineer.
That's how they did the new Beatles song. which
Okay.
are pretty much same technology. Yeah.
If only you all knew of a studio engineer amongst you that could do such things, right, David?
I don't know, man.
You mentioned Green Tambourine. Was that the Lemon Pipers?
Oh, JT, who was that?
I don't know, but that was a great song.
It was. I'm thinking that was the Lemon Pipers. I couldn't let that pass by.
I think it
when you
might have
said
been.
David.
I think it might have been. Might have been.
So the album title, After All These Years, guys, what was the catalyst for getting the band back together after all those years and for this album? And was it a difficult feat to do?
Well, JT, I'll let you speak to that. You're the one that did it.
Well, so let's just go back just a few years to the middle of COVID, because I think it was 2020, like around the middle of the summer of 2020. Nobody was working. Everybody was, we were all locked up and so forth, and nobody could go anywhere. And so I think David and I started talking back and forth, and I said, I think I got a few songs. Maybe we could just for fun, since we're not doing anything, just kind of bounce some ideas back and forth. And so we did some Zoom stuff like this, and I would just super primitively bang this stuff out, either, I don't know, like on a guitar, all thumbs, or however on a bass maybe, and then have a melody line, and then and I would send that. I'd do that on my phone, and then send that to David, and then we would talk back and forth, and so it just kind of went back and forth. So we started working, and he said, well, let's just do a few songs and just for fun. And then, one song turned into 2, turned into 3. And then I was like, you know what? And I said to David, I said, we're working on like maybe even a 4th song. I said, man, I really feel like God's telling us to do a Crystal City Rockers album. And unless we need to talk to Rob Cochran and to Craig Finley, original guys, and say, hey, maybe you guys can throw some stuff in. So they're up in Seattle, you know, yeah, I mean, yeah, original original guys, and they're up in Seattle, and we kind of ran everything by them. We all talked back and forth a little bit. Next thing you know, 4 songs is 5, and Rob starts throwing stuff in, and Craig was writing the song, and David, you know, and I mean, it just kind of felt like together, like it was really cool, and you know, fairly effortless, I guess, on my part. It's easy for me to say, right, Dave?
Well,
Yeah.
you had to make some decisions. I mean, on is it you?
Ooh, you, yeah.
Ooh, you. And JT's like, I'd really like to have a brass section on this. I'm like, well, we could do that. He goes, could we do it at a reasonable price? I said, well, yes and no. Because I mean, I'm not going to do the score for the section. I mean, I could, but Jim Frazier is, a friend of mine, engineer. Um, he's actually playing with he's playing with Loggins and Messina right now. So, but he made a score, and JT pulled the trigger and says, "Okay, I'll pay for it." And I forget how much it was. It wasn't cheap. It was like 1,200 bucks just for this one section. And
Hmm.
JT's like, "Well, I'm probably never going to do this again, so I'm just going to pay for it." And JT bankrolled. Rob helped a little bit too, but JT paid for the record, really, my costs and all that. And so he did it, and that's a really interesting song too. Just like all of a sudden, you got this saxophone solo that comes out of nowhere. Um, and it's just JT's your performance on that and the way you sang it. It's pretty classy. It just has this classy kind of roll to it. Um, so yeah, so the project just kept evolving and evolving. And is how many songs are on this thing, JT? Is it 8 or 9?
13.
13.
Is it 13?
We did 13. Yeah, well, there are 4 of them are live, right? Three or 4 of them are live.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
we recorded up in Seattle. The band Crystal City got together and did a reunion concert with a couple other bands up in Seattle. Was it 2015, I guess?
Yeah.
And so those songs that were the live songs that are on the Crystal City project were recorded in 2015. So anyway, so David wizardly compiled or put everything in the blender, and just did amazing work on it. It's just crazy.
I will tell you there is a reason for your life. You can know why I am here and you are there. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Can't you hear me crying, crying over you? Can't you hear me crying, crying over you?
If I may say, JT, it paid off in spades with the brass section. Ooh, you is one of the standout cuts. I was pleasantly surprised when this horn section came in, so that was wonderful. Guys, have you all played out as a band back in the day? Where all were you playing out back then? And where all have you played out, if able to, current?
David, you go ahead.
Well, I mean, back in the day with Crystal City, JT wanted to. I was on the fence, but JT said, "You know what? If we're gonna play this music, we should be playing it in clubs. We should be playing this in clubs." And Craig Finley was kind of guarded in that regard. I mean, sheltered or what do you want to call it. He wasn't having it. And at that point, he was kind of the leader of the band. Craig was, and more of an administrative leader for that vacuum, all the artwork and stuff that we needed to get done. Craig was doing that, and he just felt like, no, he shouldn't do that. And so we ended up just playing a lot of churches, and we opened up for Randy Stonehill, right, JT?
A lot of bands. Oh gosh, we were like the house warm-up band for Calvary Fellowship, and Calvary Fellowship was the one bringing, everybody into town, the Christian concert sort of deal, and Daniel Amos, Jerusalem, Servant, oh my gosh, yeah, Randy Stonehill, just a whole bunch of people we played with, and
Yeah.
so yeah,
I didn't know that. I mean, did we actually open up for DA? Daniel?
yeah, we do, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
forgot. Okay.
yeah, Terry Taylor, and yeah,
Huh.
yep.
Yeah, so it was me, and then eventually the band hit the road with a bus that really needed and deserved a mercy killing. It was the worst bus in the world. And it broke down many times. I think it got left in Susan would know. It's not Arizona, but anyway, we're broken down. First time we broke down, and we're with Robert Case, and he has got a bus, their band, and our bus is following his. And ours, it breaks down, and he just keeps going. Like, bye. And so we're busted down in the middle of the desert. I had at that point, from California to going across, Texas or wherever it was, Arizona or whatever, I had the chicken pox. And then I had one of my crowns that had a root canal, it abscesses.
Oh,
So I got an abscess root canal and chicken pox in the middle of the desert. You go. This is where you're opening up the cooler for something to eat, and all there is a piece of floating bologna. It's just like it was really rough. Eventually, we got it fixed and caught up with Robert, and he's like, "Oh, I thought you guys, slow down. You just catch up to us later." I'm like, "Bad answer, man. Bad answer. What are you thinking?" But so we did some quasi kind of tour, and where was it? Wait, hold on. Colorado's where the bus was left. It's still there today. I think in Denver. But we did this one show, and JT wasn't in the band at this point, but we're doing this one show, and it's in this. I can't remember the city for the life of me. Susan might be able to. I don't know, but because our wives are on the road with us. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. It was in the city, and we're playing at this kind of reach out center thing for the church. And there's like, I don't know, 7 people. We're playing. We get done. We're loading up the gear. And right outside of this place, the kid, all the young people were driving their cars around in this huge circle, just talking to each other. There's thousands of kids. And I'm just thinking, this isn't working. If I'm trying to reach the lost and I'm playing for 7 people in some outreach center, and then all the people that really need to hear it and they're not interested, forget it. This is just like, and that's not why I left the band, but it had a lot to do with it. I just felt like, no, this isn't working, But JT, you played with us up to 83? Is that right?
Yeah, yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
and then I went to Young American Showcase.
that's right.
And so in Florida. So yeah.
gentlemen, you all had mentioned, JT, you had mentioned that you all kind of got together on some Zoom during COVID and started kind of banging out some tunes. One of my questions regarding this album was, were any of these songs featured on this album back in the band's early catalog? Were there any songs that went from the band's early catalog and transferred over to here?
Yeah, yes. And I think the live songs, I'm trying to remember the now, Running Blind, This Is It. And I don't know, maybe we didn't do This Is It on there. I can't remember.
No, yeah. But there's that one song
was,
that you reworked. You reworked a song that came from an original Crystal City song that we never recorded, and you wanted to do it, but you did a complete rework on it. Remember that? What was that song?
Better Days? Not Better Days, is it? No.
In the movies?
Oh, in the movies. That
In the
that
movies was from the live performance that we've remixed. Read the songs real quick.
Okay, so we start out with Can't You Hear Me Crying? Then there's Good Day's Morning, which was one of yours, David. There's Ooh Ooh You, which was a great collaboration with you two. It's Only You, Where Love Will Grow. There's Better Days. There's Craig's Mr. X. There's Robert's Rainbow Girl. You all had a collaboration with Heat of the Night. There's Robert's Her Face, and then In the Movies, then Varsity, and then Running Blind.
It was either Heat of the Night or it was the first one. What's the first cut, JT?
Can't you hear me crying?
Right.
Yeah. This is about a disc.
Yeah.
Wasn't that a rework?
No, I don't think so. No, we never did that. No.
Okay. I thought it was a
Um,
lyric. You snagged the lyric or something. I don't know.
Well, I borrowed I stole a chorus from another song I wrote for that and added
Okay.
it to that. But in the movies, Running Blind, and then Vanity, those were originals. Those were on the original project. And then what was the last one?
The last one on here was Running Blind.
Okay, Running Blind, Vanity, in the movies. Those three for sure were on their original project. And I think that was it, pretty sure. All the rest of them were pretty new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do apologize. I just want to state for the record, friends, that I'm getting older. I'm in my 50s now, and it is Vanity. I looked at it and I could have sworn it said Varsity. The eyes need friends. So
No,
I
no worries.
apologize.
Yeah.
So JT and David, regarding Crystal City Rockers, wonderful music, great production on here. Friends, go out and get it. My next question is, was Crystal City Rockers, because whereas Bloodgood, the next band that we'll talk about in the next chapter here, was very evangelical in nature, Crystal City Rockers, it sounds to me, it's wonderful. It sounds a little more mainstream. Was Crystal City Rockers intended to be a Christian rock band, or was it not?
Now, David, you go.
It was. That was our intent. It was like back in the days when you'd play a song and then you just talk and preach for like about the next 15 minutes. And another song, then you'd preach and you do all this. That's kind of what was happening then. And I look back on that now. I said, those poor young people, we should have just played and then maybe said something at the end. Just, no. We had to do this whole thing. And I'm not ashamed of that. I just don't think it's that wise as I look back on it now. Whereas Bloodgood, well, we're not talking about Bloodgood yet, but Bloodgood was quite different in that regard. Different approach.
Sure.
But yeah, JT, when you first put the band together, you wanted to be a Christian band.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. The original intent was, to glorify Jesus and for his glory, and wasn't quite sure, how that was going to all happen. But, and I just go to this because, we got kind of the opportunity again to, play with a lot of pretty well-known Christian acts and so forth in Seattle. And then, we do different festivals and things. And I remember the craziest thing I think we ever did was we played inside of a boxing ring.
Oh yeah.
At an outdoor, it was like a huge fair or festival or something up in Spokane, Washington. And David and Rob and Craig were all bouncing off the ropes, and stuff. And it was really pretty funny. I remember how fun it was. And Crystal City was a really fun band. It was like, shoot, I'd still play in it.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. And
we were kind of considered back in the day new wave, I think. Right, JT? New wave?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Gentlemen, did this album wrap up all the unfinished business with you all, or do you think that there might be something else with Crystal City Rockers? Is it possible for future?
That's definitely a JT question, not me.
Oh, I mean, there may be like, maybe in the future, some kind of an EP, maybe a 4-song thing that happens and where we all throw a song in, but I don't know. It's, I kind of maybe in some ways for us and for myself anyway, liken that particular project to like what the Beatles just came out with when, with John Lennon, the song that Lennon wrote there. And it's just like that's never going to happen again, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It just too many stars would have to align for any kind of tour or anything like that. I think somebody would have to win the lottery or something,
Yeah.
something like that, that might be a different story. But yeah, no, and Greg Hayes, needs some kudos from Girder Records, because Greg's the one that stepped up to the plate and had the excitement to want to produce the CD project and marry it with the Bloodgood. Yeah, great. He did a fantastic job. I just happened to, through the years, be a collector of all the pictures and the art and all the poster board bills and all that. I have a lot of that stuff. So he was able to implement a lot of that stuff and make copies of it and, add that, which was what the graphics that you see in the CD, but Greg Hayes really, and then to the last thing I'll mention is Howie Green, who was the artist on the front cover and the back cover. Howie's a fantastic artist up in Boston, Massachusetts, and he gave us exclusive permission to use that. His artwork is amazing, and I really am old fan of Peter Max, that did the old Magical Mystery Tour stuff and some of the Yellow Submarine stuff for the Beatles. And turns out Howie and Peter were friends, and Howie's an old hippie. And just a really great guy, and he let us use the artwork, for the cover, and it was just he knocked it out of the park. It's really, really amazing. So,
Well, that's interesting, JT, because I didn't know that, but as I mentioned at the onset, those are the exact two vibes that I got as a Beatles fan: Yellow Submarine and Magical Mystery Tour. So it served its purpose wonderfully. So, gentlemen, if I may, JT, as a fan, it would be neat if you all could bang out 4 songs for an EP, as you mentioned, but maybe with Moises, as David was saying, put the original songs on and make one big nice compilation of then and now, so to speak. But gentlemen, if I may ask, well, Rex, did you have any questions regarding Crystal City Rockers?
No, nope.
Okay. We're going to segue now into the next chapter, but before we do, JT and David, if we may ask, when did your respective journey with Christ begin?
Well, as a young boy, my dad, Felix, he passed when I was 6, but he was a pastor and a psychologist. Some would say minister. He was in the Methodist Church. And I remember him always just kind of imparting to me who God is. I was looking at this Christmas card, and I said, "Well, who's that?" And I was looking at it as a nativity scene, but I wasn't really looking at the baby. I was looking at this other little guy, kind of looked like a just little boy. That's where my focal point was. And of course, Felix thought I was talking about the baby, and it didn't really matter because he says, "Oh, that's God's son." I said, "But he's God, right?" And he goes, "He is." So I just, that was when I was about 4 years old. And the fact that, it just stuck with me. Later, years later, when I was 14, the whole Jesus movement stuff was happening. My brother Michael got saved, you know, like in the 70s, right? And so I remember I came walking into my parents' den, and it was really dark. I'm like, I come walking in there, my brother's and he goes, "Hey, I'm in here. Get out. I'm in here praying. Get out." So I did an about face, and he came back out. He came out and says, "Hey, do you want to pray with me?" And I said, "Okay." And I just, he led me into prayers and said the sinner's prayer, if you want to call it that. It was different, a little bit more converted, but just accepting Christ in my heart. And that was 14, and it was a roller coaster ride from that point on. But when Susan and I, my wife, were engaged, or just before we were engaged, um, made for her it was giving her heart to Christ. We read through the book of Revelation because we were writing this song about the end of the world, and a friend of mine, Maverick, he wanted to write this song, and I said, "Well, if you want to know the end of the world, I mean, you read the book of Revelation." So we started to write the song. Nothing happened with the song, but Susan just read through the whole book in one night. And then she was telling me about it. She goes, "Have you read this?" I'm like, "Oh, a little bit." And she goes, "Oh my goodness, are you kidding me?" So she reads the whole thing again to me that night. And it was a moment from God, because for me it was rededication, but it just was, I mean, you could just feel the power of God just fall. And we were weeping and out of joy and brokenness. It was just really great. And so that was I guess that was 79. I'm thinking 79. I have to ask Susan, it might be 78. So JT, I'm sure you have the stories.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Your brother Rob, that's right. Can you guys excuse me for 1 second?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah. So for me, so my mom was a pretty devout Christian my whole life, from my birth. But so she took us, I had 3 siblings older than me, and she would take us to Sunday school, and stuff when we were little. And then I remember being about 12 years old, and the Sunday school teachers like, "Well, kids, you can go to hell or you can go to heaven, you can accept Jesus or follow the devil," and I'm like, I think I'll choose Jesus, I want to go to heaven. So I mean, I'm not sure that was like a little sort of a adolescent first reality of like really making me think about like where, what's going on, what's this life about. But anyway, so then, through the many years, teenage years and all that, like as David said, it was a roller coaster ride, up and down, and then mid teens, late teens, the whole drugs and alcohol thing. And I tried to go to church a few times, through the years with my mom, and tried to, I mean, I really believed in God, and I really believe I had a pretty good understanding of Christ being the savior of the world and so forth. And so I would be like, like with my friends all getting high, and we'd be like, "Yeah, man, wow, Jesus, he's cool," and but I didn't really, I didn't comprehend. But anyways, and then through some of the musical things, and I was in a couple bands, and then in my, like, I think I was 22 when I moved out to Seattle, and I left a band in Rochester, New York that I was in. We were supposed to go on Van Halen's first tour as their warm-up act, and some things happened with the band, and some of the guys in the band were on heroin, and they were too messed up. So I just basically quit, and those opportunities didn't materialize, and I quit and went out to Seattle. And my brother was out there, 3 years older than me, and I get out to Seattle. Now I'm trying to straighten out. I'm thinking, oh, God wants me to go out to Seattle. And so I went out to Seattle and lived with my brother and another guy in a house. And I get out there, and my brother's a drug dealer. You know, right? I mean, so I was out there he was selling pot and cocaine and everything. And so I was out there about a month, and like I say, I was about 22. And I said to my brother, he came home one night all high and everything. I said, "Look at you, man." I said, look at, you're all messed up. And I said, "God sent me out here so you and me can get right with God and, start to follow Jesus." And he looked at me, he's like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." I said, we need to get right with the Lord." He looked at me, he says, "All right, let's do it." So we shook on it. And 2 weeks later, we're getting baptized. He's throwing all of his pot away and flushing his cocaine down the toilet. And neither one of us ever looked back, So, and ever since, and my brother is, as well, still walking with the Lord. Lives in Florida, and just all these years later, following Jesus.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. Let's talk about another song that you two co-wrote together. It's a light pop affair. It's entitled Battle of the Flesh. All kidding aside, one of the heaviest songs in the Bloodgood canon, Battle of the Flesh, and you two co-wrote that together. Gentlemen, from Crystal City Rockers to Bloodgood, David, JT, was it a musical stretch for you two going from power pop to metal?
No, not at all. No, I was always a rocker anyway. So it was an easy transition for me. And JT was play anything really. So matter of fact, that song, uh Mark Welling ended up playing it when it hit the record.
Right.
He did a fine job. But JT, when he played that song, if you listen on the Metal Missionaries disc, yeah. I mean, he plays a fill that Mark couldn't cop. He just couldn't cop it. It's like if Buddy Rich was going to play metal, it's just like all of a sudden Buddy Rich just stepped in, and it's just like it was awesome. It was one of my favorite things that JT played, during that season. Um, but it was an easy transition, I think, for both of us. If there was any difficulty, certainly wasn't that.
So,
Yeah.
David, how did and I certainly understand. I mean, what you're saying, that it wasn't a stretch, but how did you two then, JT and David? How did you two go about collaborating to write? It's an awesome song. How did you two go about collaborating to write that song together? What was the process?
JT had already written the lyric. He'd already written the lyric, and he kind of had this melody hammered out that Les took and refined a little bit as far as just, made it into metal. Because JT's obviously not a metal singer, unless Carlson is. So there was that evolution, if you want to call it that. But JT had already written the lyric, and I just came up with this guitar part that just seemed to work, and it was pretty. It just kind of fell in our lap. Yeah, I mean, is that about how it went, JT? You had written that before Bloodgood.
Yeah, we wrote it. Actually, I don't think it was supposed to be a Crystal City song. I think it was supposed to be a super hard rock song originally,
Okay.
And I can't remember how in the world I came up, because there was a lot of words in that. That's a very wordy song, and I don't usually write that many words I usually repeat a lot of, verses or and so forth, in different pop songs. But anyway, so yeah, there was a song that David and I remember working on that song too. It was like, and it's one of those things where when we went from the Crystal City sound to, when with Mike and then, Mike kind of shared his vision with me and originally about doing metal, I didn't even question it.
Mhm.
I didn't even, it was like, this totally makes sense, And for me being a drummer, I guess for a drummer that likes to play like just pedal to the metal, it's like a drummer's dream to just beat the drums as hard as you can possibly and as fast as you can possibly play. And so for me, I thought, wow, this is cool. This is like kind of a dream come true to be able to be a drummer and play this kind of music, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, awesome song. Gentlemen, in your words, now JT, you mentioned about Michael sharing his vision with yourself and David. Gentlemen, in your words, and regarding you two, having come from Crystal City Rockers, how did Bloodgood form? What transpired that Michael met up with you guys, and how did that transpire into you all forming Bloodgood?
JT, that's your question because Michael started the band per se, but it was really it was the beginning stages of the band was just Michael and JT.
Yeah. So yeah, David. So Michael and I were going to the same church, and which is Calvary. It was Calvary East Side, Calvary, in Bellevue, Washington. And so Mike and I, he said, "Hey man, why don't you come out to my house and we'll drink coffee and listen to Beatle records." Mike was a huge Beatle fan, and gosh, he's even as I'm talking about Mike. Wow, didn't see that coming. We were getting together and drinking coffee and just talking and vision casting. And I remember like Mike and I went to see White Snake and Dio together. This would have been probably early '85 or something like that. And we just walked out of there going, man, this is it right here. We need to be doing this. And so we just kept getting together and every week, a couple times a week, and then we talked about getting together and having a jam, and we needed a guitar player, and I said, well, David. Just like that, I was like, it's David. And so I think maybe David was at the tail end of Crystal City and everything, and I mentioned, hey, why don't you just, come over and we'll jam. And Mike was managing a bandstand music in Bellevue, Washington. So after hours, we would go in there, and I think I played a drum set that was in the store or whatever. And David came in and we just jammed, and we the same thing. We didn't know if we were going to start playing secular rock and playing clubs or what the deal was, but and I'll save the little story about meeting Les, but that's really where the band started to take direction, was when Michael and I met Les there in Seattle, and it kind of interviewed him and talked to him about joining the band. But so that's really it was something that actually just kind of came together. It wasn't difficult. It was kind of like breathing, really. It was like the things just started to take place. And then David wasn't sure, I think, for a short time if he really wanted to play in the band or play that kind of music or whatever. And then he kind of, I guess, did you change your mind or something, David? Is that what happened?
Well, it was interesting. So when JT mentioned me to Michael, I wasn't there in the room, of course, but you hear about stuff later. Michael's kind of dragging his feet, like, "Are you sure David Zaffiro really?" Um, And Michael and I got along, at a distance. We were an acquaintance. I remember one time we were playing with Crystal City Rockers, and Cypress was Michael Bloodgood's band, Cypress. And at the end of the show, I'm missing my guitar stand. So the Cypress crew had picked it up. So I went to Bandstand East where Michael was working, and I'm like, "Hey, Michael, um, can I think you guys picked up my guitar stand." And he says, "Oh, okay. Well, let me look into it." So then, like about a week later, I come in, and Michael's like, he's on the counters working, and I said, "Michael, did you figure it out?" And he just does this. He just turns around. He goes, because there's stuff behind him. He goes, "You figure it out?" And he goes, grabs a guitar stand. He goes, "There you go." Like in the store, like, "Really? I'm just gonna." He goes, "Yep, yep." I mean, it's like I think Michael in the beginning kind of tolerated me because I was kind of a punk. No, without a doubt, I was. And but it worked out. But then I had this weird situation because when I left Crystal City Rockers, I felt like I wanted to do something different musically for the Lord and this sort of thing. So I was kind of I was waiting. I wasn't doing anything for a while, and then JT reached out to me. So, and yeah, JT reached out to me. We went out, we practiced. So the weird thing is, I really felt like God told me, "I don't want you to do this right now. I don't want you to be in this band right now." I mean, I really felt like God spoke to me about that. And I'm like, "What?" So by the time I'm telling Michael, you can imagine what he's thinking. Like, really? He didn't say any of this, but you could just tell he's thinking, I finally bring David in, everything's working good. Now he's a flake, man. He's just gonna quit. He didn't buy into that God spoke to me or anything. And I don't think you know what I mean? It's like he doesn't despise prophetic utterances, but it's just kind of like, it's really, that kind of thing. And then I was praying about it, and they, oh no, they came to me and they asked if I would um, jam with them to basically try out this lead singer. And I'm going to let JT speak in detail about that. But I said, sure, I'll do that. And as I was praying through this over the weeks, I felt that the Lord spoke to me again. And he says, "I wanted you not to be in the band at that time, because when you go back in, and you're going back in, I wanted you to have a calling, because you're going to have a lot of obstacles. You're doing something a lot of Christians don't believe in. They're going to pick at your shows. All this stuff's going to happen, and you're going to know that I called you in here." So he gave me Psalm 40, and that was how he confirmed it in that psalm. And I went back in the band, and so yeah, that's kind of how that played out. Thankfully, Michael let me back in the band. Oh, yeah. So
JT, did you want to comment further then? David alluded to with Les coming to try out for the vocals. Did you want to further talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think Mike put an ad. This was at the time there was I think it was a music mag that came out called The Rocket or something like that in Seattle. And back then, that was when people actually put like little ads in papers for looking for players and stuff. And so Les answered the ad, and Mike said, "Hey, JT, you want to go with me? We're gonna go into Seattle and meet this singer." So sure. So we drove into Seattle, and Mike and my recollection was it was a Denny's restaurant. And I saw Les walk in. I was facing the door, the entrance door, and Les walked in, and he had these. I think I said something about it in the movie too. It was like these spray-on jeans, man. It was, and this red patent leather biker leather, and then this flaming white hair, And so he came in and he sat down. He just looked like a singer,
oh yeah.
And him and his band, him and his wife Joyce, of course, you probably already know, but they had already had a pretty successful club band all over Seattle area. And anyway, so Les says, okay, man, he goes, what do you guys got going? So we sat there and Mike said, yeah, we're starting a metal band, a Christian heavy metal band. And we're just, we're going to, play for the glory of the Lord and so forth. And Les says, so what kind of music you playing? And Mike says, well, we're doing some Dio and, White Snake and stuff like that. We're going to maybe play some clubs or whatever. And it was like Les just looked at me and then he looked at Mike and looked back at me. He goes, you guys look pretty cool. He goes, if you're good, I'll play with you. He says, but we ain't playing none of that crap. He says, we're playing for Jesus. And anyway, so that really, Mike and I drove home and we're like, wow, it really impacted us, that this is why we're doing what we're doing, or why we want to do what we're putting together here. So, and then the first time, like David says, when David, came and played, the first time we all played together, it was crazy. I remember I drove home that night after hearing Les sing. I was like, are you serious? This guy is like, talk about horsepower.
Sure.
And anyway, but I just loved his spirit. He had not been walking with the Lord a very long time, I don't think. But his fervor was infectious. And Les is, just a positive guy anyway. And that just defined, I just, like I said, drove home just going, what the heck just happened, So that's kind of the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
David and JT, David, you mentioned Michael speaking with you about it being a calling. And I'm curious. So I live in the state of Arkansas, and I did at the time that I became aware of Bloodgood in 1986. I never had the blessing of seeing you all in concert. But I'd like to ask you all from your perspective, and with regard to the calling, David, that Michael shared with you about, those early years Bloodgood concerts, were young people like me at the time, kids, were we coming out of the woodwork to see the band? And did you all sense that the youth were hungry for this music with this message of the Lord?
That's an interesting question, because I'd have to get a read from their perspective, and I don't really have it. I know they enjoyed watching the band. There was no way they were going to watch this show and not hear about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in great detail in different fashions, just like great detail. So that was going to happen regardless. But I think the people were surprised. Think about it for a second. I mean, back then you're like, oh, what kind of band are you? Well, we're a metal band. You're like, okay, you're a metal band. What kind of metal band? Well, we're a Christian metal band. And people point at that pretty much at that point, they're thinking, well, that's an oxymoron. I mean, it can't Christian. What you can't do that, And Michael felt that JT was called to this. He had mentioned that to me. At that point, he never mentioned to me that I was called to it, but it's not going to be him that's going to say it to me anyway. It's going to be our Lord. But it did have an impact, because there are times when kids were throwing their drugs on the stage and just like, as in giving it up and coming to Christ, making a commitment. And others weren't. Others were defiant and just wanted to come and, check it out. And I'm too cool for this anyway, but I'll be here. This is my sacrifice, that kind of mentality. So there's all kinds of dynamics. But our first show was with Stryper, and the second show was with Stryper, And then the third show was with Daryl Mansfield, and he had our Metal Missionaries demo. Do you want to add to that, JT?
Oh, I mean, yeah, no, as far as the young people, they seemed like, and like the few concerts that I did, in the very beginning, I mean, I think it was like, it seemed to me that the crowds or the audience was really, really into it, and it was an alternative, to what the world, and it would be like, you'd be like, oh my gosh, like, this is awesome. This is the same music. I love this music. And these guys are singing about Jesus. So I think there was quite a bit. I think I saw in the faces in a lot of excitement about what we were doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So in
Yeah.
regards to the Metal Missionaries EP, what were the circumstances with that being recorded, guys? Can you give us any details as to how that all happened?
Yeah. Well, the first recording we did was with John Agostino up in, was it Tacoma, JT, or was it Federal Way?
Yeah. Yeah. Federal Way. Yeah.
And we did Anguish and Pain. I think we only did one song, right? Or did we do
Oh,
two?
no, we did all four. We did, oh, well, we did, I
And
thought we
not that disc. So not Metal Missionaries.
okay. Yeah. Anguish and Pain.
And something
And,
else that Les wanted to get it on the radio.
yeah.
And was it Michael Blackstone or John Blackstone? I'm trying to think of what his name is now. Keith Black.
Keith Black.
Yeah, Keith Black put it on the air, and people just called in like, "What in the world did I just hear?" They all freaked out. So that was the very first recording, and then Les is like, "Okay, we need to have a demo. We need to have 4 songs." So we went and did that at Charles Mesereau's studio, which was called 3D Productions, or oh no, ESP, Extrasensual. I can't even say the word, Productions. And I think it was on a JH24, JT, where we had 24 tracks, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to get it done because we needed to have product, because we just were informed that we're gonna be opening up for Striper. So that was kind of the motive, like, hey, well, let's get this thing done so we can, have product. And I remember the engineer, Charles Meserol, he goes, David, he goes, your amp, because I had these 2 amps linked together in the stack. He goes, your amp hisses louder than my amp will even go. Like, but just the noise factor. Remember how loud it was, JT? It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was just, if I play, of course, play. But and when I stopped, it was just like, it was like Niagara Falls, man. It's like Niagara Falls. But we got through that, and again, that's when JT was playing some pretty extraordinary stuff on the drums, and it was almost like it was live. Les did do the vocals after the fact, but that tracking kind of went down live, didn't it, JT?
Yes. Yeah, it was all live. Yeah, I think you maybe overdubbed a few guitar parts, and and then Les redid the vocals. But yeah, it's like Van Halen's first album. It's like that they pretty much laid it down live, and
Yeah.
It was a lot. I mean, I remember, again, it's like, going in the mixing room, and then after we recorded, and then hearing it back, and it was like flames coming out of the speakers, man. It was like crazy. And it's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Well, the song "Accept the Lamb" on the EP, about the last minute, it's different than the studio version, but I really like that because it's just totally different than what the song is like on the studio version. I was listening to that, this week, of course, and I mean, I was like, oh man, I forgot about that. That's different than the version on the studio version. So that was one thing I was really enjoying about the EP. And I'm sure you guys were nervous opening up for Striper as your first concert. What was that like?
David?
Well, that's the weird thing. We weren't nervous at all. I don't even think we were apprehensive. We did take note, though. I mean, I remember Michael Bloodgood grew up there, and I think the first one was in Bremerton. No, first one. No,
Bellingham.
first one was in the Moore Theater, right? Moore Theater or Paramount or Moore Theater.
No, the first one was in at up in Bellingham at the college.
Okay, let's say okay. So anyway, Michael's like going, well, man, I can't believe it, dude. You got the same bass cabinet that I do. I'm like, that's kind of cool. And then he goes, wait a minute, that's my bass cabinet. So they're actually their roadies are moving our gear for us too, which we just thought was kind of like, wow, that's really, it was really nice of them. It was kind of weird. The guys were really sweet. We got to meet them, talk to them on the bus, whether it was the first or second show, I don't remember. They're all great guys. But we just I don't think we were arrogant. I'm not coming from that angle, but we were definitely confident. And Les Carlson, he's the guy that came into the band and really made it a performance. He's a professional. He already was a professional. He did Hair off Broadway, that play, that musical. And he was just a pro. And so he kind of had us all step up. We're gonna be professionals. And JT also put into the equation because he was in American Showcase and he was managing these bands. And one of the things he was telling me is like, David, you gotta, when you play, you can't just be looking at your guitar. You got to look out at the audience, and sometimes you point and you do some stuff like that. You need to engage them. And JT, helped me with that. And so that philosophy changed a lot of different things. And Michael and JT, is just back there knocking it out. And then Les Carlson, it became more and more theatrical. I mean, one day, lo and behold, Les has got a cape on, a red cape, and he's Pilate. I mean, and then he throws the cape off and he's Jesus, and I'm smacking him with my guitar like he's getting whipped. It just had that, from day one, it had that energy, like nothing's going to get in our way, and it really wasn't arrogance. It was like more of just a calling and just securing Christ. And it didn't hurt they had a great singer, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, Les is awesome. So then Daryl Mansfield produces the first album. How did that go, and how did you guys get hooked up with him? I know you mentioned him earlier here.
Yeah. Well, JT and I, well, we were doing a show. Our third show was with Daryl Mansfield. And by that time, we did have the Metal Missionaries demo done. So we gave it to Daryl, and he took it to Jimmy Kempner with the intent that I want to produce these guys. And of course, we were fine with it. We've known Daryl for years. So it seemed like it was a good fit. And Jimmy Kempner heard it and signed us. That was a whole interesting dynamic.
Well, if I could just talk about a couple songs very quickly. JT, the song Stand in the Light, that is a little bit of a slower song, but that just has a really good feel to it. And I'm not a drummer, but I love the drums, and you can really hear you kind of driving that song and the cymbals going and whatnot. I was just wondering if you could make any comments about that song specifically to us.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Appreciate that. Yeah, so in a very open song, I kind of think a lot of space in that between the chord, the power chords, and the thing, the structure of the song. For a drummer, it's like on that type of a song where there's that much open space, you just have to play big and bad, you know. So it was just really hitting the drums as hard as I could, you know, and just following the yellow brick road, you know, down, you know, without trying to go outside, not trying to be flashy. I never was a flashy drummer. I always liked to be a pocket drummer. You know, Aka John Bonham and you know, and Ringo, of course. Just in the pocket playing, keep the beat, throw a fill in when you absolutely have to, but just keep the train going down the track, you know. So that's kind of what happened there.
And David, on the song You Lose, that just has unmistakable beginning. As soon as you start, you know what that song is. How did you come up with that intro or the beginning of that song? That is so cool.
Yeah, I didn't. Michael wrote that song when he was in Cyprus.
Oh.
Yeah, and so they did it kind of like, you know, easy going, you lose type thing.
Mhm.
And then of course we did it as a metal song, and
Mhm.
Michael says, "Well, we should try doing You Lose." And I'm thinking, is that a good idea? You know, in the back of my mind, I didn't say anything. But it worked out great. It worked out really great. Les liked it, but yeah, that was all Michael's brainchild right there.
Mhm. Well, then, and the album closes with just an absolute rocker, which I'm glad. I always like it when albums really close with a strong song. Black Snake, David, you are all over the guitar. What can you tell us about that song?
Um, Michael wrote that song as well. And I just remember it just kind of being reckless abandon, just go for it, you know. And it's interesting because we're playing through these amps. I was playing through these amps that Daryl Mansfield had. So we're playing through an old 50 something, I think it was a 57-ish Fender Bassman. And you don't usually equate a Fender Bassman with a metal sound, but the Bassman in that chassis is almost identical in the layout to a Marshall. But it's also I mean, if you one thing I've noticed about that first record and about Bloodgood in general, it doesn't sound like anybody else. The guitar sounds and all that, they're very, very unique. The drum sounds, all that, they don't sound like anybody else at that time. And you know, in that regard, so Stripers, you know, they have that unique sound of their own. But a lot of metal that you hear back then, and sometimes even now, it all kind of sounds the same. You know, like, oh, you guys using the same amps and guitars? You know, I mean, people were playing Jacksons and all that stuff back in the day, and I was playing a Strat, and people were like, why do you play a Strat? You know, why aren't you playing a Jackson? And I'm like, well, the honest answer is I can't afford a Jackson. I'm not endorsed by them. But hey, if it's good enough for Hendrix, it's good enough for me. You
Mhm.
know. So, but yeah, that song was just like, here we go, and hang on tight, because we're gonna go real fast. You know. And Michael just, yeah, he wrote it with that intent, just to kind of push the envelope a bit, you know.
Well, you actually said what I had a comment about, David, with Bloodgood and that first album. It's original. It doesn't sound like anyone. And I think that's why people really gravitated to that. So, guys, after the album was done, did you know that you had something pretty special with that record?
JT, what did you think?
Wow. I mean, yeah, I thought so. Yeah, I thought it was amazing. I think I agree with David. That there wasn't really any Christian metal that I had heard, and I hadn't heard a lot, uh, except for Striper back then. But yeah, I thought there was a few songs. I will be honest with you. There was a few songs on the record that, I weren't like my top favorites or whatever. Maybe if we would have spent just a tiny bit more time, maybe writing a few other different kind of songs. I I think you know, and I mean most of it was very, you know, continuous. It had continuity to it. It was you know, there was nothing really out of place as far as the sound, any of the sound of any of the songs. Um whereas Crystal City, you know, when we do Ooh Ooh You, it's like not really a very typical sound that is like a lot of the rest of the songs on that project. But you know, that first Bloodgood album, man, it rocked. Uh, just I was blessed to be part of it. You know.
Yeah, I mean, and Jimmy wasn't complaining about it. Frontline. I mean, when we signed that deal too, by the way, it was Broken Records, but he couldn't use that name. That was Joey from Undercovers, Undercover,
Mhm. Yep.
and so Jimmy had to basically get an addendum to the whole thing. But you know, so the first record comes out and it sells 60,000 units. It just blows out the door. Everyone wants to hear it, type thing. And back then, even now, I wouldn't mind selling 60,000 units, right, JT? But back then, that was a pretty big deal. And then Detonation went and they did 85,000, and they've done more since then, of course. But that's the debut kind of release. Here's what it did, and we're all, you know, kind of blown away with it. Whereas contrast, Striper, they were selling way more than us, but they were on Epic, which is a you know, secular machine, and they did really well on that. Sorry, didn't want to go down a rabbit trail. Sorry
Oh,
about
that's
that.
okay. Kent, you had a question or something, a comment?
Sure. Just want to make mention something that David said, and then ask JT a question. The wonderful thing about the eponymous first album release, to me, guys, as a young fan, I was 15 when that album came out in '86, and it had good production polish, a professional production, but yet it retained its rawness. And I'm also recalling, I just want to make mention too, David, your composition in there, you're Killing the Beast. Oh goodness, what a what a romper that was. JT, I would like to ask, because David made mention of the follow-up album, Detonation, which ironically contained a studio recording, full production, I should say, of Battle of the Flesh, your all's composition together. But JT, I would like to ask, and this might be a little bit more of a candid question, and we always have that pass button on the table. And so if we need to hit that, we can. But I was surprised, JT, because you were not on Detonation. Taking nothing away from Mark Welling, but JT, if I may ask, and if we need to hit the pass button, but after the self-titled first album, because you guys were so awesome, why did you choose to leave Bloodgood after that album?
Well, now that's a $1 million question. You know what? It's kind of like there were circumstances that were surrounding my personal life, and I think I questioned things, like from a business standpoint. I didn't really feel like I felt like the band was like David was saying, that Striper was on Enigma, with Motley Crue was on Enigma. I always thought we should have held out and waited for a secular record deal, and that didn't happen. So there was some tension, stress, and I think I voiced that opinion to Les and Mike. Les and Mike kind of took the reins of the business and the management end of the band and so forth. And I think some, like I say, it was some interpersonal stuff, but I think that I had some stuff going on in my life that was taking my attention away from maybe the band from time to time, maybe a little more time than I thought it was. And I think they saw, Mike and Les in particular, I think, I'm not sure if one or both of them felt that way, but that I was maybe not as into it as I should be or whatever. So however they saw that or whatever. And so we just kind of, had a meeting, and I just decided it was time to go. I guess that was, it was kind of that simple, really. And, I kind of like weirdly like starting things, like being the first, whatever, the first drummer, like doing something new. I got in the coffee business up in Seattle, and did something in the coffee business that nobody else had done before, that kind of thing. So I liked starting things and that nobody else had done before or that were brand new. And I think that I did that with Crystal City, and played my part, and then did the same thing in Bloodgood. And it just ironically, very weirdly, ended up being a very similar circumstance to what happened in Crystal City too. That I just think it's like, after a couple of years, I was in Bloodgood for probably 2 years or whatever, from the start to the finish. And it was kind of like the thing just kind of, that's what happened. I just kind of faded off into the sunset, and I love everybody and they love me. And like I said, there was interpersonal stuff going on in my life that probably wasn't extremely healthy in some ways, but as far as emotionally or whatever. But I think it kind of happened the way I guess it was supposed to. I don't know. Pretty
Well,
much it.
A little bit of a follow-up to that, and then Rex, I'll give it back to you, buddy. David, JT, I don't remember quite the occasion that it was, but I remember all of Bloodgood and Crucify and Messiah was played. I believe Bloodgood was receiving an award, and all of you all represented the band for that award. Bloodgood, to me, as strictly a fan on the outside looking in spite of changes and seasons of life, which are understandable, it all kind of seems though like there's still mutual respect and a family affair. Would that be a fair assessment as a fan looking into the band, including all of the band?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. From my standpoint, yeah, I love David. I love Les. I love Mike. I mean, yeah, over the many years, we've talked a lot, back and forth, and David and I talk even a couple times a week, all the time. And so like no love lost, and I suppose in the very first couple years after I'd left the band, I didn't have much communication with them because they were off, doing their thing and stuff. And I didn't have the opportunity to spend a lot of time with any of them. They were busy and doing band stuff, and all that just didn't happen. So I did lose touch for a few years,
Well, and I know this might be a little emotional, but I was able to see Michael and Bloodgood's last concert, February 2022 at the BMI Event Center. And I actually did get to say hi to Michael after the concert and that, but I was just wondering if you guys would be able to share a fond memory or something about Michael, if you could.
Yeah, so I remember I was mastering the remastering, like a remaster on the Detonation record. And I'll tell you a couple stories real quick, and I'm on the back porch, and this is when I was living in Vegas. My wife and I moved to Vegas to take care of her parents for a season. And I'm talking, and Michael and I, over the years, as we got, closer and closer as friends, but towards that time, we were just best of buds, yucking it up all the time. And Les would be kind of on the outside a little bit, like, "Come on, let's get this stuff done." And he said something to, like, he goes to me, he goes, He goes, well, don't mess with me, man. I fired so and so. I'll fire you too. And he goes, just like I fired. Da, 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 da. I said, you never fired me. I quit. He starts laughing. He goes, oh, that's right. You know, and but we would be doing these Zoom meetings for the next Bloodgood record because we were slated to do the next Bloodgood record, and I was going to produce it. And we're doing this Zoom meeting, and Michael and I we're just cracking up and making jokes and having fun. And Les is like over here going, are we going to do something? When are we going to do something? I'm like, this is something. This is the whole thing. It doesn't get any better than this, you know? And, but Michael and I I don't know, we were just so ready to do that record. Michael had not really had the time on the system to, um, to write songs. So he got Logic. He finally got Logic. Now, Les Carlson had Logic already for over a year. So he's writing songs and just throwing them out. And I was talking to Les. I'm like, Les is like, well, I'm not going to slow down writing. I'm like, good. Yeah, don't slow down. He goes, I mean, I don't want to just wait around for Michael. I said, well, we are waiting for Michael. We're not moving forward until we hear all of his songs too. Well, who's going to decide who gets to make this? What songs we're going to take? I'm making Les sound like a jerk. He's not. He's a great guy, but I love him very much. I said we all are making that decision together as a bit of a committee, and I just happen to have the final say, you know.
Right.
But Michael just had fun. I mean, the last year of his life, him and I working on that record, we were getting closer, and he just had a lot of fun. I mean, we would talk probably every other night. You know, it's going over the songs, sending MP3s, discussing this, discussing that. Really great times, great memories with him.
David, on that note right there, if I may pause for a minute at it. Are we talking about Dangerously Close, or are we talking about something that was forthcoming?
Dangerously Close was the mastering, and I was talking about that. I started there, but the second half of that discussion was about the next record that Bloodgood was going to, the next record after Dangerously Close, which had not, right. they were going to release another record.
We had the reason why I wondered about that was because Rex.
No, I'm sorry. Let me correct that. I was referring to Detonation mastering, not Dangerously Close. I did that one too. But I confused the two together on that. I apologize.
And I'm sorry too if I added to that confusion. The reason why I was trying to clarify for my benefit was because at that juncture, Rex and I had a couple of years ago. We had an interview with Les. It was our first interview with Les, and there was talks at that time of working toward another Bloodgood album. So I was trying to get it sorted out in my mind. I'm sorry if I added to that confusion.
Yeah, sure. Yep. Mm-hmm. JT, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, it's got, it's millions of different moments, but and I think if this is kind of like the classic moment for Mike and I, was when we were playing, we used to practice at Calvary Fellowship it was on a high school auditorium stage, is where they had church. They had a church. That's where most of the concerts were too. And I think it might have held 700 people or something like that at the most. But anyway, we used to practice there. The church allowed us to practice there. But so we were practicing one night. We'd had, anywhere from 20 to 30 young kids come just to our practice, and just to come and hang out and stuff. It was really pretty cool. And so, and there was the Killing the Beast song, and there was this one part in it, and I was just looking over, Mike's over there playing, and I basically I did this one little fill, and in that song, and the fill, I will be honest with you, it was totally copped. It was a Vinny Appice fill, Carmine's brother. Mm-hmm. And who I think played with Dio, or I think at the time or whatever. anyway, but this one little fill, and I just loved it so much, so I just felt like I wanted to add it to that song. And every time I did it, Mike loved that. Like loved that fill, you know, when I did that. But my memory of him kind of like, you know, looking over his shoulder and just smiling at me, you know, it just like is like indelled in my memory of just a moment, you know, in time when it was all rocking, you know. It's pretty cool.
You know, that last show at BMI Center,
Hmm.
that was recorded.
It was?
Yep, I've got the multi-tracks. So does Les and Joyce and Les do as well. And I
Wow.
think there was picture. I think there was footage, video, picture. I think there's a few different cameras, maybe 3. And I've been talking to Marilyn, and I talked to Les, and just like, you know, I'll tell you right now, if you want to support that legacy, that last show, a lot of people are going to want to see that. You should
That'd
do it.
be,
You should be
that's
consistent.
me.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I would,
we could actually really do it. We could pull it off. There's no problem in doing it, you know. And I don't know, it's just not getting from A to B, and that's okay. That's not my call anyway.
sure.
I'm not in the band, but
That would be wonderful though, David. Yeah.
yeah, it'd be
Well,
great.
at the right time, may if it's the Lord's will, may it happen at the right time.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, my last question to you all. What was the most rewarding experience for each of you being in Bloodgood?
Hmm.
Well, I think for me, the most rewarding experience to being in Bloodgood was just kind of like when I played in music with those guys, it was like going bowling with the guys, you know? It's like when we were playing, we were jamming, we were playing. I don't care if we were practicing or playing a show or what. I just enjoyed being with the guys, you know? And it was always, that was always what it was about for me. I didn't, you know, I mean, sure, like fame and especially fortune would have been great. But even though, you know, the fortune part never happened, but you know, but for me, it was just really about just being with the guys, you know, just being like part of the team, just enjoying the moment, playing a good song, you know, having fun, you know, being with my brothers, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, for me, there's multiple times on the Detonation tour where there'd be obstacles, you know, things that are difficult, like I don't know, maybe bad legs and power, and it's real noisy, or power shuts off, and then that was a really interesting story about that. But for me, I would go out there, and I would, in my spirit, maybe even verbally, would just praise God. I'd praise the Lord, and wanting Him to be my strength, because it was just like you could go out there and tired or frustrated or haven't eaten or whatever, and I really needed to have God's anointing while I was playing, and I felt that anointing multiple times, and it was just the joy of the Lord, and that was probably the most rewarding thing in Bloodgood, other than people coming to Christ. That was, I could really feel God's strength in that, and I was desperate for it because there's times when it was really hard, you know.
JT, you, if I may, to you and David and Les and Michael and everybody in Bloodgood and the Bloodgood family. JT, you made mention something about, you know, the fortune and, you know, it would have been nice. And of course, I certainly understand your context. It made me think though, you know, right now in my personal journey, reading the Bible, I'm in Deuteronomy, and I'm constantly, the Lord is talking about the Levites and the things apportioned to different people. And he's like, you know, the Levites, their portion God said is from me directly. And you know, JT, and I know I understand your context, and I'm with you. I understand. If I just may say though, I could only, when you were talking about that, it just made me think, you know, JT, people such as me and Rex, and to you, David, and all in Bloodgood, you guys were like our youth ministers. And we hung on, we loved the music and we hung on to the words, and y'all were our youth minister big brothers and saying, hey, little brothers, this is not the way over here, this is the way. And JT, I can only imagine, because like the Levites, you know, they were the temple workers working directly for the Lord. And I can only imagine that your fortune is when the Lord looks at you, JT and David, and as I can't speak for God, but Michael has seen face to face the King above kings, the Lord above lords. I can just picture the Lord Jesus looking at Michael and saying, well done, my good and faithful servant. Come and share your master's happiness. And JT and David, I can only surmise that that's your reward too. Your fortune that's awaiting you. And I just want to say thank you. You've reached this young person right here. And I'm sure Rex would say the same.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I don't know. We talked to a lot of artists, and they don't never realize the impact that they made, because you're just going from town to town, and you don't really realize the ripple effects that you create. But you know, I was 18 when the first album came out, and you know, here we are, you know, over, you know, almost 40 years later, you know, talking with you guys. And so we just want you to know the impact that you guys made on us teenagers back in the day to stay true to the Lord.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
where could friends or fans, you know, connect with you guys at? Do you have websites or anything where fans could talk with you or share with you their stories?
I'm pretty approachable. There's always the Bloodgood site, the official site. Someone could, if they wanted to reach out to me that way, it would get to me.
Mhm.
But also just even on Facebook, I have people on Facebook Messenger. They'll send me a message. They'll say, "Man, I'll listen to your record. I did it. I'm like, well, thank you. You know, and I respond back. I said, you know,
Mhm.
that's not as common, I think. A lot of artists, especially super big artists, they're not approachable, and they're all incredibly insulated. I
Mhm.
don't think Bloodgood's ever been that way. I don't think we've ever been that way.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Same
Rex,
for
if
me.
you're interested in picking up Crystal City Rockers, there is crystalcityrockers.bandcamp.com.
Mhm,
And of course, bloodgoodband.com, as David alluded to.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And anybody can get a hold of me on Messenger too. I'm not on Facebook for the foreseeable future. But I may pop back on sometime. Not sure, whenever Jesus tells me to.
Mhm.
So
Cool. Well, my last question here, guys, before we do message from home, um, what would you each like to say to all of your friends and fans, and or what words of wisdom or advice would you like to share?
David.
Yeah, you go first, JT.
Well, obviously, thank you for being a fan through the many years. As my brothers were just talking about just now, if I was personally part of anything that impacted your life and to come closer to Jesus and have more of a faith in Father God and His Son Jesus, that's what it was all about. And thank you for being a fan, and it just really means a lot, I think, to all the guys that are left. And we just really encourage you to seize the day. Seize the day, tell people about Jesus, as many people as you can, and just love people, as God loves us.
I was talking to somebody the other day, I forget who it was. Probably said it to a few different people, but I said, you've heard of the 11th commandment, right? And they're like, David, there's only 10 commandments. I was like, oh, no, there's a. And they go, okay, what's the 11th commandment? And it's really where Jesus says, as the only one that has the authority to do this, he says, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I've loved you. By this, all men will know that you're my disciples. And that would be what I'd say to everyone. Just, that's what's important here, is that we love one another. And from time to time, that's very much lacking in the quote unquote church. We get hung up on all the things that really are not important. But I think the Lord did want to make it easy for us, although it's very difficult to do, but he wanted to make it clear and simplify it. Just a new commandment I give unto you. But sometimes it's hard to do that particular commandment too, so.
Well, we always close out with something, guys, called Message from Home. And it's a scripture verse that relates to the band or something with the band, one of their records. And I've picked out a scripture today. There's a song on the first record, Stand in the Light. And I'm going to read Luke chapter 11, verse 33. And it reads, "No one lights a lamp and puts it in a place where it'll be hidden or under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand so those who come in may see the light." And you guys, your band was one of the first Christian metal bands, and you're showing God's love and light to the world. And I think this scripture just demonstrates what the band was trying to do. And again, me and Kent just want to thank you again for being out there and kind of blazing the path for other bands and just showing the world God's love and his light. And we just thank you so much for that, guys.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, thank you.
We're gonna close up, but if you guys would just stick with us 1 minute. Thank you again for spending so much time with us. It's just been a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much. But we're gonna say goodbye to everyone and thank you.
There's a light that keeps us going.